Hello there! Welcome to part 18 of my Clone Wars analysis series. In today's video, we'll be examining Mystery of a Thousand Moons, Season 1, Episode 18. The goal of the series is to unpack the Clone Wars anime show and look closely at its themes, characters, and politics. As always, there will be spoilers as we're covering the entire episode and series. That said, let's jump into it. Mystery of a Thousand Moons is the second part of a two-part narrative that underlines the flaws of Anakin's attachments. As ultimately, it is his inability to let go of Padme and his fear of loss that pushes him to the dark side, this arc is a great foreshadowing to Revenge of the Sith. In the former episode, a deadly virus was recreated on Naboo by Dr. Nuvu Vindi, and Padme had the risk of being infected. Now, Padme and Ahsoka both become infected, and as they are the two people Anakin care about the most, his patience will be strained beyond measure. The quote for the episode is, "A single chance is a galaxy of hope." This quote measures the quantity of chance against the quality of its emotional value. In a no-context void, if a situation had zero chances of a positive outcome, then there would be no need or worth in trying to achieve that result. However, if even the smallest door remains open, then that allows us as individuals to gain emotional stability through the notion of hope. Episode 4 is arguably the most iconic aspect of Star Wars, and it is built upon this thematic quote. While the Death Star is seemingly invincible, its single weakness becomes the rebellion's only hope, and they are able to rally around that chance and go after it. Rogue One isn't from George Lucas' Star Wars, however I think that it fits in perfectly as Jen Erso says, rebellions are built on hope, which aligns with this quote. When it comes to the context of this particular episode, Padme and Ahsoka are seemingly going to die to the Blue Shadow virus. The smallest chance of finding a cure becomes the only thing Anakin can cling on to, and perhaps preventing him from showing even more dark side traits. The episode picks up right where Blue Shadow virus left off, with Anakin and Obi-Wan taking Vindi to Coruscant for trial. Anakin refers to Vindi as a Slimo, which is an insult he used as a child in the Phantom Menace. This arc thematically draws on a lot from Episode 1. The physical environment is Naboo, which had the hangar, and the references to Obi-Wan's connections with the Gungans. When they meet Jabba Hood later in the episode, he is somewhat similar to Anakin as a child. Perhaps this subtle usage of Slimo prepares the audience to subconsciously start thinking about young Anakin again, to be paralleled by Jabba later on. In the Separatist lab, it is discovered that one of the bombs is missing its strand of virus, which means a droid removed it and the threat of the virus still looms. This droid activates the bomb, triggering an explosion and the spread of the airborne Blue Shadow virus. When trying to get to a closing safe room, Ahsoka uses the Force to keep the doors open and allow Rex and the other clones to get to safety. While she doesn't push them through the door, the imagery is somewhat similar from Jedi Crash when Anakin pushes the group away from him and he takes the explosion in the Venator hallway. She's able to make it in as well, but because of the situation was too slow, they're ultimately all contaminated. While Padme was safe when the explosion went off and the facility is secure, she's aware that the remaining battle droids will try and break out and that risks the virus spreading throughout Naboo. Her primary character motivation is the safety of Naboo and its people. She went from Queen to Galactic Senator to work for her people, and the prior episode risked her own safety by coming to the lab in the first place. While it is further risky to combat more droids amidst the viral spread, in her mind it is much better than all of Naboo perishing from the virus. She says, "I cannot let that virus escape," to sum it all up. Anakin interrogates Dr. Vindi, pulling his lightsaber out and asking for an antidote. If you trace your memory back to Cloak of Darkness, you may remember Ahsoka pulling out her lightsaber when interrogating Nute Gunray. Luminara pulled her back with scorn and said, "Terror is not a weapon the Jedi use." Anakin is contrasted with this and doesn't mind using his lightsaber as leverage in a questioning. While Ahsoka did it out of immaturity and impatience, Anakin does it with intention and intensity. Anakin gets pretty angry and Obi-Wan has to draw his intensity back. Vindi says, "You mistake my role, Jedi. My job was to manufacture a plague, not to cure it." Vindi says creating the virus was his job, which is interesting for our analysis. In the prior video, I discussed how recreating an extinct virus is quite the challenge and that it would take many years in my opinion. I doubt that Vindi started working upon the start of the Clone Wars, and more so that he started his work earlier on, and when the war did start, the Separatists backed his project financially. The last episode also gives us a clue to Vindi's past, as Typho informed us that as a figure, Vindi disappeared 10 years ago. 10 years ago is roughly after the Phantom Menace and when Sidious and Dooku began the creation of the clone army with Jango Fett as a model. Perhaps Vindi was hired then to make a virus so that the clone army could be weakened and then the droid army could be superior. In addition to Order 66, perhaps the virus could have been part of Palpatine's plan to eradicate the Jedi. Perhaps it plays no part in the war and simply Palpatine saw Vindi's work as a way of creating chaos. Palpatine orchestrated the Clone Wars so he could gain power as a political figure. It is very possible that he would have orchestrated a plague, too, so he could benefit from the chaos it would cause in the galaxy. Typho helps the Jedi in search of a possible antidote. The needed medical route is known to be on one of the moons of Iego, a planet with 1,000 moons. Again, this episode draws on the Phantom Menace ideas, as in that film, young Anakin mentions that angels are on the moons of Iego, which we'll see later on. After learning of a potential cure, Anakin is urgent and anxious to go get it. he expresses both his attachment for Ahsoka, his Padawan and friend, and Padme, his lover. To cover up his attachment and marriage, he corrects himself into saying Senator Amidala after referring to Padme as Padme, when Obi-Wan looks at him. Some fans were surprised by Obi-Wan knowing about Anakin and Padme in Season 7's Bad Batch arc, but I think it's always been obvious if you didn't even know in Attack of the Clones. In the Twilight, Anakin and Obi-Wan share a short conversation which touches on the quote for the episode. Kenobi says, Ahsoka and Padme will be fine, to which Anakin says, they will be if we succeed. If there wasn't a possible antidote, Anakin would likely be boiling with the fear of loss and anger. Because there is a potential cure, even if it's remote and hard to get to, it gives him hope that he can succeed. If you examine Revenge of the Sith, Anakin is convinced and concerned that Padme will die in childbirth. The only metaphorical antidote in that situation is the dark side that Palpatine upsells. In many ways he's cornered, as he can't ask the Jedi for help because marriage is against their code, and he doesn't see any other options that he can do to save his wife. However, the core problem would be his attachment and inability to let go. Even when exposed to the virus, Ahsoka shows integrity and purpose. She says, we still have a mission to do, which is to prevent the virus from leaving the lab and exposing all of Naboo's population. I truly think that when Ayla told Ahsoka in Jedi Crash, don't lose 1,000 lives just to save one, that Ahsoka learned and developed from that. Putting into perspective her age at around 14 shows her determination and character. If I was 14 and in this situation, I'd probably be freaking out. In addition to Ahsoka, Rex is also contaminated, and so is the clone squad. They too have no qualms with continuing the mission and fighting the droids despite the virus because they know it will save Naboo and lives. After the hidden enemy, you may question what some of the clones are thinking after Slick claimed that the clones are slaves to the Jedi and die at their whims. While this is true, the nobility of the Sith clones who still fight is indisputable. Upon arrival to Aigo, Anakin and Obi-Wan are greeted by battle droids. Anakin is quick to use his lightsaber, which you may recall he was tempted to do so as well when encountering the Talls and Trespass. Obi-Wan had to tell him to be patient then and more perceptive, and the same thing happens here, but only after Anakin cuts down 17 droids. This scene really demonstrates the differences between the two characters, how Obi-Wan is more calm and thoughtful, and how when Anakin is worried, he's completely blind to reality and impatient. The two meet Jabo Hood, a young boy who has repurposed and repaired the battle droids to be his personal servants from a nearby Separatist factory. He explains that the Separatists left the system and the droids behind, and he repurposed everything that was laying around. Jabo says, no reason to let a good droid rust. In many ways, he's technologically savvy, just like how Anakin was as a kid. Anakin created C-3PO and engineered a pod racer. Anakin comments on the impressiveness of Jabo's work, showing that they're similar and have the same understanding of technology. Jabo also warns them of Droll, a guardian of Aigo who prevents Star Pilots from leaving the system. It is later elaborated on after Anakin and Obi-Wan get the root needed to cure the virus that is actually a Separatist security system. Jabo accompanies the Jedi throughout the town on Aigo and talks about how the planet is a backwater civilization. In many ways, it parallels the imagery of young Anakin Skywalker telling Qui-Gon Jinn how Tatooine is a backwater planet. An Aigo resident mentions Droll and says it's the curse over the planet. Obi-Wan calls it local superstition, but it's perceptive to know that something real is behind the fact that ships get destroyed when trying to leave the system. Inside the bunker, Padme's suit gets compromised during battle. Ahsoka expresses some guilt over the situation, but Padme says these things tend to happen in a war zone. She's pretty used to combat. Her planet was invaded when she served as queen, and she was scratched in the Geonosian arena and fell out of a gunship during the Battle of Geonosis. Even when contaminated with the deadly virus, she doesn't show fear. She accepts it as part of the reality of her work and duty to her people. When leaving Aigo, the Twilight triggers an energy field of lasers which seems to be triggered by proximity sensors on the asteroids surrounding the planet. It forces them to return to the planet, and Anakin receives the transmission of Ahsoka and Padme, the two people he cares about the most, dying from the virus. They're coughing and visibly sick, but they aren't sad. They're successful in their mission to prevent Naboo's contamination, and as Naboo's senator and protector, Padme says, promise me that no one will ever open this bunker. She also seems about to say, I love you to Anakin before the transmission cuts out, which inflames Anakin's worry and anger. Anakin and Obi-Wan have another conversation which highlights their different personalities. Kenobi says, a great leap forward often requires first taking 2 steps back. Anakin responds with, and sometimes all it requires is the will to jump. This 2-line conversation highlights why Anakin turns to the dark side at the risk of losing Padme, and how Obi-Wan never fell from grace despite losing the woman he loved, as well as his student and brother, and his entire order. He thinks things through more, while Anakin reacts more out of emotion. On Aigo, Obi-Wan explains to the citizens that Droll isn't a spirit but a separatist security system. After conversing with an angel on one of Aigo's moons, he comes to the conclusion on where the system is controlled from. Using Jabbo's abilities to reprogram Vulture droids, they come up with a plan to destroy the security system and escape back to Naboo. This plan is successful and they're able to return. Back in the bunker, Padme, despite being sick herself, helps take care of the sick clone troopers. She's off-put by the death and disease around her and says, "What a waste." Rex says, "With all due respect, Senator, it's what these men were born to do." While Rex isn't questioning existence and enslavement like how Slick did in The Hidden Enemy, I think Slick's words might have affected him, even if just a bit. Rex is conscious of the fact that he and his men's purpose as clones is to die. Committed to a moral and just galaxy, Padme says, "I hope that their sacrifice brings us closer to peace." Upon returning to Naboo, the antidote is administered off-screen, but on-screen, Anakin reunites with Padme. She explains that she'd never lost faith, which ties to the episode's quote about a galaxy of hope riding on a single chance. She calls him General Skywalker in a formal way, but holds his hand, which speaks to their secret intimacy and marriage. Padme also compliments Ahsoka, a testament to Ahsoka's character and Anakin's teaching. Ahsoka also briefly talks with Anakin and says that his teaching was responsible. He admits that his teaching is partially responsible for her success, but that it isn't the full picture. This is another testament to Ahsoka's moral character and overall capability. While it meant something coming from Padme as a Jedi and her teacher, it means much more coming from Anakin. Overall, the episode does highlight how Ahsoka has grown as an individual over Season 1, but also underlines the problems with Anakin's character, which will inevitably lead him towards darkness.